Hey everyone, welcome back to the arena. This is MD, joined here by Covey, and once again, a really special guest that we can't wait to get into. Right before we do that, just love and appreciation to those listening.
What's up, guys? Happy Monday. I'm not sure if I know this won't come out on a Monday, but we're recording on a Monday, so happy Monday. We've got a very special guest here. Her name is Ayesha Sehra. I get it right?
Yeah.
Yes. All right, got it right. Ayesha is a social media brand strategist, a lot of things. A business coach, social media influencer, speaker, podcaster, you name it. She's probably involved in some way or form. And so with that, I first of all would like to say thank you so much for coming on here and for sharing your story and your wisdom. And secondly, I want to pass it over to you to just say, like, who is Ayesha and how did she get to where she is today?
I love it. Well, first off, thank you guys for having me. It's such a pleasure to be on the other side because I'm a podcast host as well, and I feel like I never do podcasts. I just am so like I'm all about the intentional no's this year. So I'm just like, okay, you're focused on these things. And yeah, it's just so nice to be on the show. So thank you so much. We're gonna have so much fun. And a background on me. So I always do this question too to my guests, and I'm just like, it's such a loaded question to ask someone. So now it's my turn to go for it. But I'm a founder of a PR agency here in LA. I'm Canadian, so moved to LA when I was 22 and decided I wanted to build a business in LA. And long story short, it's kind of a crazy journey because you can't just move here as a Canadian and work. And a lot of people who are from other countries, I know they feel my pain points with this because you have to get a visa. And visas are like insane processes to go through, and every country's different. And also, just being like in my 20s now, it's changed a lot. Like from our parents' age to get a visa to now, it's very different. So that kind of skyrocketed me into entrepreneurship because after exploring all the different types of visas, the only one that was really aligned for me was the E2 visa, which is like what people do when they want to establish a business in the States and employ and be truly an entrepreneur and create a company and their own business that's on their own terms. So I'm just gonna skyrocket this journey. I started a PR and marketing agency here in LA, and now our agency specializes in PR for brands. So I work with a lot of CPG brands and just different brands that are focused on, events, PR events, influencer campaigns, influencer seeding, traditional press, founder PR, all pillars under the PR umbrella. And then that got me also into managing talent. So, influencers, public figures, speakers, authors, we introduced a talent sector. So, we kind of do everything extending for their brand. I feel like I'm their business manager as well, where, you're handling all their inbound, all their deals, all their placements, all their press opportunities, which is definitely such a fun ride. I feel like I'm always on and always working, but I feel like that's being an entrepreneur. You should love what you do. And it's definitely been a crazy ride, but a fulfilling journey. And then the other element, I always say it's like the other bucket I have is the podcast. I started my podcast when I was just traveling to LA, kind of going through like the entrepreneur journey of like, okay, this visa, establishing the visa, going through it, because that was also a year to get all the paperwork done and to submit a visa application. And that's when I started Coffee and a Good Vibe. I started it because I wanted to just connect with new founders, just like how like we kind of connected. You reached out to me. I love doing that to new people. So I started reaching out to different people who were founders of companies, people who I thought were doing cool things in a city that I didn't know a soul from, being from like a small town in Canada. I started just going out for coffee with different people, different founders, and learning from them. And I thought like I had something here to record and to share with the world, especially like a lot of my audience was people from my small town who thought I was crazy for moving away. So that's kind of how Coffee and a Good Vibe started super organically, but naturally, like from the beginning, I interviewed someone who was a founder, and then they were like, wow, you should actually interview or meet my friend who's also a founder of this company. And it kind of grew from there and compounded really quickly. And then a big pillar of Coffee and a Good Vibe is our events. So I do founder dinners and live podcast shows in LA, New York, and then the Hamptons. And I feel like that's been something super fulfilling for me because I can combine my PR background and all the brand connections and all the work side of things, but then put it towards a passion project, which is these live events. And the live events are truly just to bring people together that kind of all operate with the same ethos, vibes, and intentions. Because when I moved here, that was a huge pain point of mine, like meeting people who are also hustlers and go-getters and wanting to help each other. So I wanted to create those spaces now that I'm in a really blessed position where I am connecting with new people all the time. I want to kind of just create these environments where everyone can come together and connect.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I was going to say the next founder dinner you have in the Hamptons, actually anywhere. Sign me up. Go ahead. Yeah,
January Q1.
All right, I'm there. That's a self invite. Go ahead.
Oh, party of two. So small town Canada to big town in LA. I'm just wondering about, had you already outgrown that small town in Canada, or talk about like the self growth required within yourself to be able to take that plunge into LA and surround yourself by, like you said, a lot of hustlers, successful entrepreneurs, influencers, etc. How much confidence did you have to grow? Was there ever doubt? Like, speak to your journey just within your own like psyche.
So much. Like, fear, you name it, and especially like going through that journey in my early 20s, and I'm super close with my family. And of course, I always say this to friends of mine too. It's like they had so much of their fears too, also putting on me. And I'm not saying like, oh, it's a bad thing. It was all coming from a place of love. Like they were just so scared for their 22-year-old daughter who's like, I'm leaving, I'm gonna go build this path. And it definitely I definitely went through the most like adverse times in my mental state, but then also the most beautiful times because it allowed me to grow into the person I am today. And truly, like whenever I face any kind of adversity, I just know what I went through I feel like I grew so much during those pivotal moments of having like everything against me financially, well, legally with a visa. Like I felt like I hit every roadblock. I couldn't even get a credit card here. Like it's like starting from literally ground zero. I couldn't even rent a car because in the States, in LA, or like I'm sure this is every state, you have to be like 25. And I didn't have a I had a Canadian license. Everything was like against me, even the simplest thing, right, of opening up a bank account because you don't have a social security. And like then you're in the process of applying for one. And even with the E2, you don't even get a social security. You get an employment identification number. So it's for your company. So it's just like insane with having every adversity against you. But then my mindset through it all grew so much. And it was probably the most lonely time of my life because I was in LA all by myself. Like I was Airbnb-ing at the time, just figuring out, going through that visa process and obviously like opening up a business account. And like I always say too, like there's always another way. So when I got the no for there was no way when one bank was like, you can't open up a bank account in the States without this. I'm like, well, there has to be a way, even though the attorney doesn't know. I just would always find another way to make sure, because someone's done it, so then there has to be a way. So I always kind of had that mindset of like, okay, that person says no, that just means I have to go another route. And I think constantly having all these no's and all these things going against me, it makes you just be relentless. And all those things that you build throughout that journey truly help you like at later stages in life. But throughout that journey, I would say like the biggest thing for me was strengthening my faith. So I'm huge on law of attraction and faith and prayer and journaling and all these tools that really strengthen your mental resilience. Because at the end of the day, if you are not, you have to be your own best friend. And even though I'm really close with my family and I have such a good relationship with them putting their fears, and it's just them being worried. Like my mom's biggest thing I remember at the time was like, build a marketing agency remote. Like it's an online world. Like that was her whole thing. Like, why do you have to be there? And the thing is, that's crazy. Like even just skyrocketing the journey a little bit, like once I did get the visa and like things really changed, I'm like a stickler. Like whenever I connect with people online who are debating to move to a big city, I am just like, do it. Because when you're in this environment, it is a melting pot for so much abundance and blessings and opportunity and people. And I always say it's like you could go to a coffee shop one day and you could meet someone who could change your life. And I know that can happen in any city, but like Sahil Bloom talks about this too. You increase your luck surface area, and I really believe that here in these big cities you do. Because I remember I was getting coffee, so when I was in LA, like just figuring out my visa, I would go to a coffee shop all the time when I had to remote work. And I was just like, I'm in LA, I have to remote work because I'm in the area of opportunity. That was like my mindset. And anyway, I was in line at a coffee shop one day, and long story short, the gentleman in front of me started a conversation with me, and I find out he was the guy who introduced me to the attorney that I got my E2 with. And that was a big deal because there's a lot of attorneys, and especially when you don't know, like you need to connect with the right one. There's so many out there, and also you want to go with someone who can help you get this visa and someone who's also very connected and established. But the guy who was in front of me at the coffee shop's like a Canadian who started multiple companies in the States, like a very successful entrepreneur. And that person was the person who introduced me to the attorney for the visa, helped me with the E2 visa. There are so many things you have to do for it that, like, you have to get office space, you have to sign X amount of clients, you have to employ. And it's such an area I did not have any clarity on, even with like, setting up the business in the right way in the States. This guy became a mentor to me and navigated me throughout this whole journey. And I just met him at a coffee shop. And that would only have happened if I was in LA at that time, like in the environment. So I'm always pushing towards that, like of how much blessings come from doing things outside your comfort zone. But I can kind of go into
Yeah, I
the
love
Well,
that.
principles, but
were you ever close to giving up? Like, was there a low point in this
so
journey?
much, so much
What's
because
the
it
lowest
took.
point?
I remember like it was very lonely. Like there were so many days where, you're getting so many no's. Also, you're going through this process of trying to build a company, prove your worth with no experience in the States too. Like any clients I had in Toronto, like people don't, especially in LA, like closing brands to become your clients and just different types of leads, that doesn't come without experience. I feel like now I get so much business because I've been here for 5 years. I'm in the scene. I'm like always meeting new people. People are connecting me. But when you're starting from scratch, you really have to prove yourself with no track record. And it's hard, right? When you're getting like a billion no's. And I would always just tell myself, like, okay, like every no, that just means there's a yes that's coming, or this one wasn't meant to be. I just had to keep putting the reps in and trusting and having so much faith in it. But it kind of got to a point where I was like, okay, I would tell myself, okay, 4 months of this, like, you can do it. Like, 4 months, give yourself. And I remember I got my family to be like, okay, we're gonna really like be your cheerleaders and advocates for like 3 months. You have till March, like it's January, 3 months. You can, if the business doesn't get to this point or you don't see that growth, then come back to Canada and just build your business from home and like maybe explore it at another time. And you know what? I remember that 3 month hit and nothing really changed on the business side. I didn't close any other leads, nothing changed. But then I remember like just knowing like I just need to be in LA this next month. Like I need to figure out how to afford to stay here and stay. And in that month, I ended up like my business transformed. Like I remember I went to this one event that one of my friends connected me to. Um, Everything kind of has a backstory, which I feel is helpful, but I'm all about putting yourself out there. And this one friend of mine who's very connected in the space connected me with a founder who was someone who was very big in LA, and she ended up inviting me to this mastermind weekend in the OC. And I remember that weekend at that conference, I met so many high quality leads, and I ended up closing like 5 clients, 5 big clients, retainer clients, and instantly like my business changed. It like 5x technically, and they were like big retainer clients. And everything kind of changed in that weekend on the business side. And it's just crazy because I always say this, but when you think you're supposed to give up and you keep going, from you taking that action of keeping going and actually putting more skin in the game and not giving up, I feel like you show the universe, you show like what you're made out of, and that's when the blessings can come. And I also believe that like these things don't happen when things are going well. It happens like when you are almost about to turn down, and you always see that like with people's journeys, like when they're about to give up, something happens. And I'm so big on, now it's like I'm always so big on like, hey, when I think things are bad, like something good's gonna happen. Like something
Yeah.
good is on the horizon here.
Yeah, no, I love that. I have so much that I want to ask you about after what you've said. I guess I'll start with, because there's the latest thing you said, but just on like the idea of rejection and how your relationship with rejection has maybe changed and transformed, from a place maybe at first of like more of like a scarcity, and this kind of ties into the other point you made around like
Yeah.
abundance versus having a scarcity mindset when you come in to a new to come into LA with nothing. Like, talk about how your relationship with both rejection has transformed, if at all, and also just like if you ever had more of a scarcity mindset and how that changed to abundance mindset and what that kind of means to you.
Totally. So I realized when I moved here how messed up my like scarcity mindset was, because when you live in an environment where like you go to Tim Hortons and it's like $1 for a coffee. Also, everything I've ever made up until this point was in Canadian, and I remember when I converted my bank account to US dollars with that conversion at the time, like you lose like so much money off of like your whole bank account converting into US. And it just was, I didn't realize like how much my money mindset had to change, and how I had to really rewire my belief system to also be a magnet for abundance, and to operate from that ethos, because I'm so big on law of attraction. And when you go into the principles of it, we attract what we are. And if you're operating from like a scarcity mentality, then you're only going to attract in like scarcity things. Like you're only going to attract in like a lack mindset. Also, people in your life who are also operating from that like, I'm broke, I don't have enough. And it was so much of it when I understood this, I changed the way I talked about everything. When I went to Erewhon, because Erewhon Market is so big in LA, and coffees are $15 or $10, I wouldn't say like, oh, I can't afford that, or that's too much money. I would just say like, oh, it doesn't make sense for like little things, like doesn't make sense for me to like buy this right now, but little things of like the people I was around too, I would not entertain that kind of conversation. So even with my family at the time, like with saying like, oh, the visa journey is impossible, or like it's hard to do this, I would just rewire that into another statement. And I would just do statements around money, like money is abundant and flows to me effortless and easily. I remember placing in the Airbnb that I was in, because it wasn't my place, I would write down things on a paper. I literally did this, and I wonder if I literally think I saved the papers where with a Sharpie I wrote like money affirmations. I used to be so good with my money affirmations, but now I've like worked on my abundance mindset so much I don't repeat affirmations like that. But back then I would write them on the wall, and it would be placed above my desk, and it was just like a paper with a Sharpie, and it would just be like, I'm abundant, I'm wealthy, I have more than enough. Um, Money is attracted to me at every take I turn. Opportunity is attracted to me everywhere I turn. Just different affirmations like that. And it was such a rewiring game, because you don't realize, especially when you move to an environment where you're around all this abundance and you're feeling like less than, you have so much work to do. And I also think like every level is a new, it's new levels, new devils. So I even find this now in my business, right? Like now that I'm at a whole other level of of my journey. It's crazy, like the amount of entrepreneurs that I get to be, I'm so grateful to be surrounded by, and the levels of wealth that they have. And it's another mind play, right? Because I'm around people who are making hundreds of millions a year, and I'm just like, how? And now I'm like, wow, okay, I have so much work to do on my money mindset because clearly it's easy to make that money and I have to think abundantly. And it's just so crazy how the growth game is ever evolving, but it's such a rewiring and awareness too of like what is the mental framework? What's the mental talk that you have going on in your head? And also being so self-aware to call yourself out on it and change it.
I very well said. And my other question was going to be around law of attraction, which you also covered, and I didn't believe in until I did the work on myself. And then I was like, oh, okay. Like I look back and like I was attracting the type of people I was, which was not a great person, which was a person that hadn't worked on himself, a person that was wounded, all that stuff are the types of people that I was bringing in my life. And now, as I've done the work on myself, as I've healed, like those I'm starting to see are the opportunities and the people that are now coming into my life. And it's hard to really, at least for me, really wrap my head around until I've actually experienced it firsthand. Because like if you just read a book on law of attraction, I remember doing it a couple years ago, and I was like, this doesn't make sense. But when you experience it and you do the work, it becomes so much more real. There was one thing you said in the beginning that I wrote down that I really liked that I want to ask you about. And you said this year you're all about the intentional no's. What does that mean to you? Where is that coming from, and why is that so important to you?
Yeah, I'm learning. I think the growth game, I'm such a person who's like lean into the growth and what you said about, like you attracting and exactly like what you are. I call myself out on that on a daily basis. Like even in this journey of like having a business and managing influencers and sometimes I feel like I'm burnt out and I'm like, okay, well, what boundaries am I not in placing that I feel like people abuse like access to me or like I'm always on and like all these different things. I think we, as much as it's like so hard to face that truth, even in like romantic relationships, like if someone is wrong to you or does something that's, not for your like not what you tolerate, it's like we set the standard for how people treat us. So it's so important to like always place the flashlight back on ourselves whenever someone treats us the wrong way, as much as that's such an ego tripping thing to do. I'm like constantly doing that. Like, okay, what did I do to make them treat me like that? And it switches to how you even treat them back. But on the intentional no's, I think that's been such a big thing for me this year with realizing how I've been a people pleaser my whole life. And as a kid, I was always a people pleaser. I always like to make sure that, I bending over backwards for people. And in that journey, it's definitely, yeah, it served me a bit, but at this stage in my journey, it's really not allowing me to grow to that next version because you can become really burnt out really quickly from doing that. And also, in this environment of LA and in these big cities, a lot of the people that I look up to and emulate, they have these boundaries set in place. And boundaries, when you have powerful boundaries, it's a level of self respect and how people perceive you and
Yeah,
treat
it's
you back.
self-love. Yeah.
So I think on that note of like creating having intentional no's, that's what I told myself. Like, and I think I always felt so bad and guilty when I would say no. Like if someone's like, can I pick your brain for an hour and can we go for coffee? Like getting those DMs are like I would feel so bad to say no, but then I just don't have the time and bandwidth and I'm just at a different stage in my life where I can't do that. So I have actually a idea of like how I'm gonna do something even like cooler to do something for the community and something casual like a coffee meetup. But um, with just being really intentional with no's, I think that the biggest thing that's helped me is if you're saying no in a very polite, kind, genuine way and it comes from a place of love, it can't be perceived in a wrong way. And also if someone is triggered by that, because I've definitely had that with people being used to the people pleasing me and me never saying no and then now saying a no, I've learned that, you know what? as long as I'm coming from a loving place, like it's just that they're being triggered. But I have to do that to protect my own space. And I think the biggest thing that's been such a motivator to be more intentional with my nose is that how much space it creates for the yeses. And on that law of attraction note, like if you don't create space in your life for what you're calling in, it's not going to come. Like if your schedule is so packed with a bunch of things that aren't moving you closer to your goal, then you're never going to get there, or you're not going to create the space to entertain it. Like people say that with relationships all the time. Like if you are so busy and you don't create any time for dating, like how are you going to even have space to entertain a relationship? I remember that was a huge thing that I realized like for so like after so long of just like packing my schedule to the brim and not having any space for just social time and just other kinds of opportunities to flow in.
Yeah, I want to say one thing real quick on that, because I think is really important for me to understand too around people pleasing. And like what really stuck with me is like by saying yes to something that you don't want to do, you're saying no to something else that's potentially there that you now have not given yourself the space nor time to do. And when that hit me, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, wow, like I really need to start respecting myself and my time, and understanding that, like to your point, you're going to burn yourself out, especially doing things. And like the other thing I think about is like, would I even want, if I was the person that I'm saying yes to and I really don't want to go, do I even want to go and like not be the best version of myself, and be somewhere that I actually truly don't and deep down want to be? Like if this person knew how I actually felt, would they even want me there, kind of thing? And that's helped me as well.
Yeah.
Well, just first off, grateful that we weren't on the receiving end of an intentional no. So thanks for spending some time with us. But I'm just curious if you had to learn that lesson the hard way, like if you actually experienced that burnout, because I would imagine when you were first getting started out in LA in those first 4 months, you're probably wanting...
You say yes to everything.
Right, yeah,
everything.
Exactly. So
and I tell people to as well.
Yeah, so how did you learn that? Was there a mentor? Did you learn it the hard way? And what was that? What did that look like?
I honestly think so. The boundaries have been fairly new with implementing them. Like I was always aware, and I thought I had boundaries, of course, like, but not to the extent that I have this year with my year of saying no to create space for the yeses. And also on that note too, like even for someone listening who wants to start doing this, I think the biggest thing that I always tell myself when I'm growing through something is that like, blessings always come from the other side of all the discomfort. So like even when I have friends who are like going through a really hard heartbreak or breakup, I'm just like, that just means like once you grow and you become into the person that you're meant to be, you're going to be blessed with this amazing partner that actually is aligned, and it will make sense like a year, and then you'll be so grateful for the things that didn't work out. Like that's just always what I find that happens. So I think having like that mindset of like trusting that like what doesn't work for you was meant for you, and trusting that that just means like there's another door. Like whenever I get a no, that's like always what I tell myself. I'm like, okay, that one stung, but like that just means they're not it, like, or this opportunity wasn't aligned and the right one's coming, or the bigger opportunity is coming. And then when you have like that win that comes in, or like that opportunity, then it almost reinforces you, and then your belief system definitely does grow. But I think this year, with just the growth of the business and the podcast brand and like all these things kind of hitting this momentum that I've always been calling in, I kind of hit overwhelmed, and I've been very overwhelmed even in the past couple months. I think when Matt like reached out to me originally, that was probably the peak because I just felt like a lot of the things that I was working towards with even the podcast brand and the events, and that was really growing, but then I didn't have any bandwidth to even schedule interviews or like even explore opportunities that were coming in. And then with the business, my time, I was spread so thin. And I also think it was through just like hiring as well. I felt like making these bigger hires on the agency, I've always been the person who does everything and like wants to be so hands-on with things. And I noticed like, wow, if I want to scale and serve more clients and scale the pie, I have to be hands off. I have to delegate. And that like whole journey of actually delegating, and then delegating certain things, and then also being the transition with like clients of like introducing new team members, I just felt like, oh my gosh, like I am one person and I feel like I have the weight of the world on me. So things had to change. And that feeling of being so stressed and overwhelmed made me realize, like, okay, I don't want to feel like that again. So where am I? Why am I spread so thin? And how can I make changes to not have that happen. And also the other thing around that, it's like if I'm spread so thin, I can't even be a magnet for abundance because there's no space. There's no space for new clients.
Mhm.
There's no space for new opportunities. I have like a vision board. I have all these things I'm calling in. And like, where are the changes?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I don't think you realize, you definitely help our listeners, but how applicable what you just said is into my life in this moment around just
Mm,
like trusting the process and like as it relates to rejection. And I think it's very easy to say what's meant to be will be, and I wholeheartedly believe that, but it's very easy to say that when things are going good and everything is going right and you're getting the quote unquote answers that you want and everything looks good and rosy. But it's much harder to say that when things aren't playing out quote unquote as
so
you
true.
expected. But it's also that much more important to trust the process and trust that quote, and have faith in that moment, because that's when it's when you're like, oh man, I what's meant to be will be, but it doesn't feel like it should be the way it's going. And I think it's just super important
Hmm.
for us to trust that whatever's happening, is happening for a reason. And while one door is closing, that's just another one opening. And I absolutely love what you said there. And then you talked a little bit about, I think you've kind of danced around it, but just like self love through boundary setting and stuff like that. Like, what is your relationship with yourself in terms? What is your relationship with self love? Like, how has it evolved kind of on this journey?
Oh my gosh, I think I've recently learned, well, in the past like couple years that I've had, like I haven't been truly being like super kind to myself. Like I think that boundaries are such a form of self-love and self-respect. And when we aren't nurturing ourselves and filling our own cups, like then you're doing a disservice to everyone. And I think it's so easy to say that. And then when you're really burnt out and you don't have anything in the tank, you really realize if your cup's being filled and nurtured. And I think that's been a whole journey for me because even with like navigating like relationships and dating, it's like, wow, someone can only love you as much as you love yourself. So you really do need to be being like nurturing yourself because if you set the standard for how everyone treats you, right? Like personal relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, and I think that that for me has been the biggest unlock because I'm like, okay, like you have to care about this because if you don't, like that's going to mirror your reality of like how other people are also going to treat you. So that's been growing a lot and also like just with being around people, I will say, like, I get so inspired by people who are also at another stage of self love for themselves. And I see that even within the space that I get to work in with managing influencers, right? Like, I think that some of the talent that I work with, they're so good at their self care routines. And I get so inspired. And I will say, like, self love and self care looks different to everyone. And I think finding, like, that balance for you is just so important and knowing like what your values are, what you need to refill. It has been so pivotal because I've noticed for me, it doesn't have to be like some expensive thing that I have some friends who will go get like the most expensive massage and like the most expensive that like for me, I've noticed it's just giving myself time, like for myself, not feeling rushed. Like the biggest thing that I like to do is to do what I did when I just moved here and like what would soothe me always was like taking myself to the beach and sitting and thinking and being with myself and journaling like the things that I truly love are always free. It's so I also think it's so much of self-awareness of like knowing yourself and what you need. I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't mind a really bougie massage, but I've learned like okay, like I don't even need that. It's like something that's so simple. But as long as like you're leaning into that and doing it on a whenever you truly need that and creating that boundary and then implementing that, it's so important. And also, it kind of affects like your relationship with your standards too and like growing the boundaries because then you have this like level of self-respect that you wouldn't even let someone suck your time away, or like you wouldn't like entertain a client who's low vibe. Like you grow your own like self-respect with your own self.
And on that note, like you've talked about on your podcast, Coffee and a Good Vibe, you spoke about mental health being placed outside of ourselves a little bit, with entrepreneurship and how you're measuring success, especially with money as a measurement. But you just talked about like the best things in your at least self-love routine are free, right? Well, now that your success has grown, as money has started to come in, I'm curious, has it become more and more difficult? Have you started to feel like you're straying away from that a little bit and you have to recenter yourself a bit? Or like, how are you
Yeah.
currently measuring your success now that money is flowing in with your business?
Oh my gosh, you know what? I'm so grateful that like we both have podcasts and we get to interview different people, because one of the things that I think I learned from the early days, and I'm also so grateful like for my family, because I know like they work so hard for every dollar that they have, and I think that yes, that also built like scarcity mentality of like a family who like works so hard. It built like those beliefs for sure. But I also am just so grateful for everything that I have, and I've learned through even like interviewing different founders over the years who, they've like sold company for 200 million, 300 million, and you learn like when you meet with them like, wow, okay, like they wish that everyone would achieve that level of wealth so they can realize that like that is not the end all be all. And I know that like if you are like, I've been there, like struggling to pay bills, and I understand like you do need a baseline level to like provide, and you do need to have that. But it also is such a motivator to me. And even right now in this phase, I always tell myself like nothing is worth it unless you are happy and you are enjoying this process. Because I went through like the past couple of years for me. My dad's my best friend, and he got really sick over the past couple of years, and we almost lost him so many times. And it kind of hits on this point that we've been talking about this whole time. That's why I'm like kind of gonna bring it up. When you hit these like really low points, and you don't think like there's an out, and then you have to lean on the things that people talk about, like gratitude and being grateful. And I will say like until like those moments hit where I was like, wow, like the person I love the most, like the only thing that matters to me, like that the only person that matters to me could be taken away, you end up becoming so grateful for nothing. And like I am grateful for those moments now, because it's allowed me to become this person who's grateful to see the sun every day. And like this level of gratitude I have to just wake up and be outside, or even like to call my family on the phone and realize that's such a blessing that like they're okay and we're all alive and we're here and we have clean water. Like life is such a blessing. And I think that when you go through those hard times, that's what shapes the character, because I see it in LA. Like I think it's a blessing to be around all this, because I see people who have everything and they're so unhappy and just so not grateful. And I'm like, that makes me be so grateful to come from a family that works so hard and come from this like and have these adversities where everything could be taken away. As much as it sucks to go through them, man, the person it builds on the other
Hmm.
side, it really shapes you. And I feel like as much as I grow, and even financially, I'm not money motivated at all. I only want money to give it away. That's kind of like my vibe.
That's what they say. Like billionaires, all they do is give away their money. So
Yeah,
how
all I
valuable
want to
can it
do with the agency is like, yeah, continue to grow it. Yeah, I want to employ more people. I want to hire amazing people who like love what they do, and I want to throw really cool dinners to connect people and be able to get more extravagant with what we do. And I think like I really know what like fulfills me, and what brings, and it all comes down to self-awareness and knowing that. And when you know that, I feel like your sources of happiness and fulfillment aren't money. It's not related.
And so what has I guess like let's connect this fully now. So then what has your purpose then become? Like what are you pursuing big picture?
Ooh, and do you mean like, to answer the question like exactly how you want? Do you mean like what are the like the goals of the business, or like what I see myself doing like in the coming years?
I think just in your life right now, like broadly in life, you've talked about gratitude for the sun rising and being
Hmm.
able to just journal and call your parents, right? So then what becomes your mission and what's driving you when it's not the money? And I think that's really important for our listeners who want to take a leap to go to LA, start a business, be quote unquote successful in the way that you've described it or you've built for yourself. But then if it's not the money, right, like what is driving you right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. See, this is why you guys are good podcast hosts. You ask good questions. Um, you know what? I get so fulfilled from like I love having the agency, but when I do the events and I think about how much I struggled to like create a business, build connections, like when we got on the call and we're talking about like guests on our show and
Hmm.
these connections and these introductions, like they take work to build. And I'm like, I don't take it lightly now when I have someone who I've wanted to interview, like reach out. I'm really grateful for it. And I soak in like, wow, I'm so grateful for this because I remember like calling this in 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And I love to be that connector for other people. And when I think about like that little version of myself who even like growing up, who was like not a cool kid in school or like tried to fit in or like wanted to be like doing this thing, and I think about that and I think about just like how beautiful like what happens when I can make a relationship happen, or like when we do an event and I think about the person who was me who would have killed to be in that room to connect with 50 people that could essentially like open up doors. And I think like also there's also like other founders, right, that can connect and their businesses can grow. And I think about those opportunities and I want to create a brand and a movement that can really foster this for other people. Because I think that anyone's life can change in an instant. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. I think anyone can create anything that they want, and it's so much about like the environments you're around, the mindset principles that you live by, and just being in the and I also believe like that luck, right, of being in the right places at the right time. Like a lot of founders I interview always say that that has a portion too. But if my mission here, my time here on earth can be to help that, like facilitate that for other people, then I'm so fulfilled by that.
Yeah, no, your level, and there's no question here, just acknowledgement. Your level of gratitude and just like light shines so brightly
Mm-hmm.
across. We're 1,000 miles away, whatever it is, but like I could feel it, and I think that's a real purposeful energy, and one that like not a lot of people have allowed themselves to unlock and feel. And I think on MD described your purpose, and kind of like the way I would summarize that, there's this quote that I've been sitting with recently that hits very like strongly, and it's like the meaning of life is to find your gift, the purpose of life is to give it away. And it sounds
Oh,
like
I need to write that down.
yeah, and like your purpose
It's
to
like a lot.
me like just sounds like you love, I mean, again, it's really helping other people, which I think is such a common theme through connecting others, and that's born out of your personal experiences, and that's just so powerful for people to hear. And so I just wanted to acknowledge, no question, just
Thank
acknowledge
you.
the light that you shine thus far on this conversation.
Thank you. I also feel like sometimes, people are like if you could be a light and catalyst for someone in any way. Like I remember I had this one event and this one girl from my hometown was in LA actually at the time when I had one of these events. Like I'm not doing them like every month, and she was in LA and she came to it and she said like she met so many people there and she's in that process of trying to make the move from like Toronto to LA, and facing so many like different roadblocks. And that event, like she met so many different connections, and she actually connected with my mom and was like that because she's been watching my journey. She's like inspired and she's working on making the move to LA and like making that move for herself. And I'm not saying like, oh, move to LA. I'm not like start a cult. Like, no, I think it could be anywhere, but I just think it's like taking the bet on yourself in any way. Could be like in any capacity, but I just think a lot of people will sell themselves short and not, like take that risk. And if the people you're around are not being really supportive of that, there's probably a whole community of people who would be your cheerleaders and say yes. So I'm just trying to expand that as much as I can and be that cheerleader. That's why I'm grateful for digital, like the platform, right? Because you can be that yes to people in their ears through the podcast and really enforce that. Because a lot of people need that if they're not around it. I don't take it lightly too, just being here in LA. I'm like, I am so grateful that I'm around people who are inspiring me daily. But I am so well aware that when I moved here, I did not have that at all. And then I was even around like people who were just like negative. Like that happens everywhere. So even the littlest things about your external environment.
Yeah.
No, I love it all. I mean, it's thematic with a lot of the conversations we've been having, which is just surrounding like the idea of serving others once you've filled your cup. Shifting gears a little bit, you know, scrolling through your content and naturally picked out the one where you're talking to Sahil. You know, whoever listens, huge fan. But you know, he was owning most of the airtime in that piece, talking about being able to break down goals. And I really want to bring this talking piece to our audience because I think it's such an important one where a lot of the time we have these big grand pictures of what we want to accomplish in, let's say, a year. He talked about breaking it down to like, what do you need to do today, and setting the goal of the day, really. And then there's a very subtle response that you have on your own clip there towards the end that I think is worth shining a light on, where you talked about the idea of momentum, being able to like accomplish one day and then accomplish that second day, and then momentum towards accomplishing a goal starts to build. And it's an idea that I don't think is maybe broadly talked about enough. And I'm just curious, like, can you elaborate on the idea of momentum towards a goal? I really think that's a real thing, like a force or an energy, and I want to hear your experience with that.
I love that. You got all the good questions over here. And also I will say you will meet Sahil. So you guys are coming to my next event and Sahil's gonna be there too. And this IRL connection is gonna happen. In Q1 of next year, we're like putting it on this podcast. It's gonna happen. So I'm excited for that day. But on momentum, I truly believe that like it matters so much in the journey. It's like going to the gym too. It's like once you start to move towards and taking that positive action, it also feels so good. Like I think for me, like even in the business every single day and like moving towards goals, I think about like I'm so big on routine and having structured action items, and every day I even every week, every single day I set intentions, I set goals, I have it all like processed out, and I make like even when I go to a coffee shop, I won't leave until I hit my like 3 needle moving things and then I can go. But if I don't hit those, I'm stuck there. Like I do things like that all the time to like make sure that I'm moving myself along. And I think for me the momentum sticks and like actually hits and applies when you soak in the feeling of how it feels to move along. Like for me, I get a lot of fulfillment and energy from like crossing things off my to-do list and moving towards like X goals that I've been kind of visualizing on and marinating on for like a certain quarter. So I do believe that like the momentum piece, like for me it sticks just because of like that feeling of hitting it and like how good that like state of being is to operate in. I don't know if I answered.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would say like I don't know if because you wear so many hats, but if you don't do any sort of life coaching, you would be phenomenal at it, because there is such an emphasis on.
I would love to do that one day, like a group coaching. Because I also feel like everyone's going through the same thing. Like that's the other thing. It's like we're all going through our own like hurdles in different words. You know, like we express it in different words. And also I think everyone goes through the same hurdles, but it's just at different like stages.
Yeah, and the other piece on that momentum, at least for me, what I've seen in my life is there's just a little bit of a confidence that builds, and it's just a little bit, but that's
so perfect.
You do it a couple days in a row, that confidence starts to slowly build,
and then you don't want to mess it up.
And then you're like, this feels nice, and like I feel accomplished, and like
it's like when people stop drinking, and then they're like, oh, I don't want to like drink. I like because I love like it feels so good to like not wake up early. Like I love my morning routine so much that I don't want to be out late ever now. I'm like I don't want to ruin it.
You almost start a competition within yourself. If you're anything like me, because I've had these sort of episodes here and there where it's like you almost start another competition with yourself of like, well, I haven't broken the course yet. Like I can't give in now, and I have to keep going. I've always equated it to taking the snowball. The hardest part of a snowball is getting that initial ball form, but then once you roll it down the hill, it just grows and grows and grows, and there's really nothing that's going to be able to like stop it at that point.
Wait, that was such a good analogy. Is that yours? You should
Yeah,
coin that.
yeah, it's within my own head. I mean, like
Wait,
that's why
that
I was
is
so drawn to the clip.
okay. That should be. Oh no. I think I lost you guys for a second.
Yeah, you can hear us?
You can
Yeah.
react to the snowball thing again.
I said that should be a soundbite. Like you should make a clip like that. I said that to Sahil about the green lights analogy. The he had a green lights analogy from Matthew McConaughey's book,
Oh, it's a great book.
and that reel went viral. That hit the Explore page.
For our listeners,
got it.
what is it? Do you know?
Um, yeah, so it's called One in a Row. So basically, it's like it's almost like a mindset. Like you just do. It's actually kind of perfect with this topic of just doing one in a row. Sometimes it's like daunting to have to do like so many different things. So Matthew McConaughey in Green Lights has. I watched this reel so many times. I'm like saying it word for word. Matthew McConaughey in his book has this term called one in a row. So you just say, I'm just going to do one in a row. And it's just kind of even what we're talking about. Like that one in a row seems like easy. And then you kind of go from there. I think a lot of people mess up. Like when I was younger, like 18, 19, I used to do personal training. And I used to do personal training at in Canada, we say university. And I always thought that like people, when they start, like even like clients at the time, like they would want to like when they invest in a trainer or a program, all of a sudden they want to go from like, you know, like having like hamburgers and cheeseburgers and like drinking to going from like, I'm gonna have my gallon of water, I'm gonna eat
chicken,
broccoli.
broccoli.
It's like it's gotta go like gradual, right? So I think a lot of us do that, right? Like we want to have like go from 0 to 100 when it could truly just be like, okay, like with steps, right? It's like I'm gonna walk. Maybe if you're walking 5,000 steps a day, bring it up to 8, then bring it up to 10, and then like you gradually grow from there. I think it's so much too about like just starting like in increments too versus going from like 0 to 100 because it doesn't have to go like that.
Yeah, you just have to start. And I think what also happens is even if you don't see results, quote unquote, externally, you will feel them internally, to your point. And that feeling is very powerful. And like I said, I think, and then eventually you'll start to actually see tangible, quote unquote, results that you can actually measure. And then you're going and you don't stop.
Can I just resurface the infamous apple and cookie metaphor? There, I mean, it's been about 40 episodes, but there's, you know, it really just starts with making the right decision, you know, and like that's how you get that first one day in a row is like just when you're faced with the next decision, pick the one that is congruent with what you're trying to accomplish, and then that really, you know, ultimately starts the momentum piece. It's the less attractive option in the moment. But it pays off in the long run versus the more attractive option in the short term that doesn't pay off in the long run.
Which is tough because we're humans and we want short-term pleasure, and so it's going against what what we like to do. All right, I have, first of all, thank you so much for your wisdom and your sharing everything and being vulnerable and open. It's been such a good conversation. It's been a really helpful one for me. Like I'll just be honest. Like I haven't had the best day today. But like you just lit this conversation up.
Oh,
and
that makes my day.
The feelings of gratitude and like it really just put back into perspective everything and the fact that like there is still so much to be grateful for. And some people will take it as cliche of like, oh, I'm grateful for the sun waking up, but that's a real thing, and it's very powerful when you're able to live in that state. And so I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
We have 3 questions to wrap it up. And the first one is, what is either the best piece of advice you've ever been given, or what is like your favorite quote?
Ooh. I think I'm going to go for my favorite quote. But I think, I have a lot actually. Actually, I'm going to do 2. One is simple, and it's if it's meant to be, it will always be.
Yeah.
I always tell myself that because, like, you know, when you're navigating the journey and a lot of things don't align, or you are a controller like me and like loves to control, I'm like really in this process of surrendering so much and just trusting. that is what I always tell myself. Like, okay,
Especially as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, especially as an entrepreneur. Another quote that might be a little bit, I don't know if it's too much for the audience because I haven't even shared it with even my podcast audience, and they're more like they know I'm all about law of attraction and all of
No, I
that,
love
but
it. I love it. I want to hear it.
I I haven't even said it verbally, but I like say it in my head all the time. But Gabrielle Bernstein is someone I look up to so much. She's come. This is I always speak everything like it's coming as it. She's coming on my podcast so soon next year. She'll be on the podcast. Also, if you guys hang with me, anyone I'm around, I make sure like whenever they're saying something, you have like it's happening. Like I don't say things like I wish or I hope. Like
Uh-huh.
no, it's gonna manifest. It's gonna happen. It's already happening. But she says this quote that really sticks with me because it's all about like I truly believe in a higher power and I think that we're supported in every way. And her quote that she always says is if you knew who walked the path beside you, there would be no fear.
Hmm.
Or and it's something along those lines and I think about that all the time because I have a lot of fear always in my journey, even
Hmm.
still like being someone who's like I'm very like faithful and I work on my mindset, but there's fear, of course, when you're playing the game at a big level and every level there's fear. But I think trusting and believing like, you're always supported and there's a higher power help like guiding you every step of the way. Like how can there be fear? Because it's all divine. And it's helping me navigate a lot in my
Yeah,
journey
I,
right
I,
now.
I absolutely love that. I've had my a topic of been on my mind lately is fear, and
Mm,
fear's never going to go away. You know, like fear, do you have fear in one part of your life, you'll get to another part of your life, and a different
yeah.
type of fear will come. But what you have the ability to control is your relationship with it, and
Mm,
when you don't let it can dictate the decisions you make, but instead bring it along with you, and tell it like, hey, yeah, I hear you, but we're going to do this anyway because I know it's
mm.
good for me. It's calling me to do this. So I absolutely love that quote. And then the second question, which I think you'll like, is if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh my God. Oprah? Because I
I
love
love that.
Oprah.
I think
And
that's the second person that said that. You're not the first.
I just think, imagine, because you know how we connect with so many people all the time with having a podcast and we get to learn. I also think I'm so biased to podcasts, but having a podcast has made me such a good listener because you have to be present and absorb and listen. And Oprah's interviewed everyone, and she is just such a queen in every way, having every adversity come her way and what she's created. Yeah, I would love to hang with Oprah.
Yeah, I love that. All right, and then lastly, like, what do you like to do in your free time? What are your hobbies?
Oh my gosh. I sound boring. I love, okay, because I am so on brand with Coffee and a Good Vibe. I truly love to like go to different cafes, especially when I spend a lot of time in New York. And I love New York because I can just wander the streets and discover like new cafes, new bookstores. Like, I eat that shit up. Like, going into different like environments and just letting myself flow. I've been a huge like I've learned how much I love to actually be fluid and flow, despite the crazy structured life I live. I've learned how much like it's so fun to just like let yourself explore and be fluid. So that's why I always feel like New York's the best to do that. But love going to different cafes and just soaking in different environments, journaling. I love to go to the beach. I love spending time outside. So hikes, beach, anything active, cold plunge, sauna, anything active, anything personal. Love that stuff. Um, and yeah, I think that like those are, and then I really love music.
I,
I know we have a podcast and I know that people are always like, go on a walk, listen to a podcast. I say that all the time, but like, I love music and I love to just take myself on in the mornings I've been doing this, like during sunrise, watching the sun come up, putting my AirPod Maxes on a dope playlist and I feel like I'm in a movie. Like putting on something really good and watching the sun come up, like man, the simple things in life, man,
yeah,
they don't cost a thing, but they can bring you so much joy.
Yeah, no, you definitely hit that point where it's like it's the simple pleasures that are the most rewarding, and a lot of it is also just it sounds like working on yourself and bettering
Yeah.
yourself, which
And
is
whenever I like find myself being so petty, because I can get like sometimes when you're in these big cities and you're around a lot of this environment where everyone has everything, I have to check myself twice. So I think like really creating space for myself weekly to just like I always say like take yourself on a date with yourself. Like we schedule time for everyone. I make Google Cals for everything I do with friends. And like well I do that for everyone. I should do that for myself too. And that's been such a game changer for me because when you move around so much, I'm always at an event, I'm always around different work meetings. It's sometimes like a dreamland, and I need to come back to reality, come back to self, and just be grateful for the sun and seeing a palm tree. And I think that like that always brings me back home when I like create that space to ground in that energy.
yeah, no, I love that. Thank
Great
you.
note to leave off on.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on here again.
Mm,
We really appreciate it.
Thanks so
thank you
much.
guys.